Our guest today, Mike Caggiano to my left and Dave Caggiano to my right. Mike's a retired captain from Malden PD here in Massachusetts, and Dave is a firefighter. He's Mike's son. He's a firefighter in Lexington. He's also a stand-up comedian. So we want to get right to it. Mike, you're a former cop, and your son grew up to be I'm a firefighter and a comedian. You must be so proud.
I'm very proud of him. Very proud of him because he picked the right choice. He made the right choice this time.
Was it to be a firefighter or to be a comedian?
Both.
Okay. Have you seen his act?
I have. He's actually let me show up about, I think, 3 times I've seen him.
He's let you?
Yes.
Okay.
I have to gain permission.
You got to gain permission because you never know what he's going to be or he knows what he's going to be talking about that night.
I don't.
But
Right.
Did your father inspire you into comedy because he's a funny guy, or was it a survival mechanism?
He is a funny guy, and he is supportive, which is probably contrary to what you'd think. You're trying to pit us against each other immediately.
Right. That's exactly right.
I come in, you welcome me in here.
Yeah.
I immediately just get...
Listen, we don't serve alcohol to just everybody.
No, he's funny. He's all right.
So this is going to be an entire 45 minutes of you two being nice to each other and saying we're happy father-son team.
Well, do you want me to start?
No, I want you to
Are we allowed to swear?
Huh? Yeah, you're allowed to swear.
Am I just
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Dave forgot to introduce me. This is Dale Lawrence coming up.
I'm getting to that.
Oh, you are? Okay, Dave. Continue on.
All right, fine. I got to go.
Only our 60th podcast.
Dale, yeah, that's right. That's why I start with them first. And this is what I'm going to say, because you guys want to talk about having a good relationship, father-son. Now we turn to Dale, all right? See, Dale, see how I'm following the path?
Yes.
All right. What was the relationship like between you and your father, Dale? Was it just like this?
Oh, absolutely not. My father, I remember the day I was 5 years old and he told us he was going out to get some groceries and he never came back. Came back about 8 years later. And between those 8 years, he did a few months at Rikers Island in New York prison for white-collar crime.
You're like, I'm going to grow up to arrest anyone that goes out and gets groceries.
Absolutely. Anyone who leaves their family, any domestic I go on, they're getting arrested if it's a guy. There's 3 little kids in the corner. Actually, there was 6 kids in the corner waiting for him to come home.
Wow. And then for the next 3 years, Dale would go down to the corner grocery store and every mail that would leave.
Yeah.
Are you my father?
I just walk in there and say, my father came here like 4 years ago. Then he came here 5 years ago. He was about 5'7", kind of had a beer gut.
What did he go to Rikers for?
White collar crime.
What kind?
He's embezzling money from, I believe it was Jostin's Ring Company. He had all the Super Bowl rings on his hand because he worked for many years there and he was a salesman. So whenever they did Super Bowls or World Series or whatever they did, they would give all their salesmen, all their upper echelon people a ring. Not the same ring. Kind of like the ring that they would use to market. So whatever he did, he stole some money. They caught him, probably pled out 3 or 4 months, and they threw him in Rikers Island.
That's wow.
Yeah.
And so he's a criminal.
Yeah, are you Italian?
Cop.
I'm half and half. My father's Irish. My mother is Italian.
Okay, that makes sense. Every Irish or Italian, it's just always they always either become cops or criminals. And it's like there's just one. There's no in between.
Yeah, in my family, he wasn't a good criminal, so I figured, well, I'm not going to be a good criminal. I might as well try to be a cop, and I was like a mediocre cop.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to Inside the Line, Real Stories by Real Cops. I'm Dave Rattigan, and that fella right there is Dale Lawrence, retired police officer from the suburbs of Massachusetts. Our email address is realstoriesbyrealcops@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and please share because we appreciate you. Mike and Dave are here, and we're going to talk about cops and their kids, cops and firefighters, and our favorite messed up stories from the streets. So as an icebreaker, Mike and Dave and Dale, after Mike, if you have any of these, but during your time as a cop, were there any notable incidents with naked people?
Oh, God, yes. Yes. How many do you want? How many?
As long as they're attractively naked, that's what we're looking for.
How much do you have time for?
Let's start with your top 1, and then we'll work our way down to the top 3.
Got a call one night of a woman calls the police station saying she needs help. She doesn't know what's wrong, but there's something going on with her. So we figure it's a medical aid. They send it as a medical aid. And I just happened to be there was 2 cruisers on the street that were close by. The other guy and I, we were both in women cars at the time. We go up the steps. We get into the kitchen. The woman is literally sitting at her kitchen table, smoking a cigarette, stark naked. She's like, I don't know, probably in her mid-40s.
Yeah.
And so we come in, the door was open. We come in, we go, you need help. What's going on? Nope, I don't need help. She said, I just wanted to talk to someone and have someone sit here with me while I'm having my cigarette. And so we did. We sat with her. She had her cigarette.
He did.
And then the ambulance showed up and I checked her out and she goes, "No, I'm fine."
They didn't even even bring her in for mental health issues.
I'm talking back in the 70s.
Well, okay, there was no mental health back then.
Yeah, back in the 70s, one of the guys stayed with her to comfort her shift, and the other guy rode patrol for the rest of the midnight.
That's not similar to yours, because I remember you told us one.
The one with the mentally deranged girl.
The mentally deranged girl who was on the couch.
On the couch, and she always called.
Also naked.
Also naked. Wouldn't be a good story if she wasn't naked. And she always called when my partner, she was infatuated with my partner. So she would call the station and ask if so-and-so was working. And we happened to be working that night. And we showed up and we came to the door. Door was partially open. And we heard pleasure moans, Dave. I know you know what those used to sound like when you were a young stud.
I remember way back when.
Yeah.
Speaking of the 70s.
Yeah. And we opened the door and she was naked on the couch, pleasuring herself, asking my partner to stay. And this wasn't 40 years ago, Dave. This was literally 5 years ago.
Well, some communities are a little slower than others.
And we were forced to take her in for a mental health evaluation.
That's the new police thing.
Yeah, the new thing.
Do you have we'll get to you in a second, Dave.
Yeah.
But Mike, what's your second one? What's your second best one?
Well, the second one was a guy, and he.
Listen up, Dave. This is right up your alley.
So we get a call of a disturbance in an apartment. And it's a nice brick apartment building, really very few problems there. So we get there and we could see that the windows are broken, like outward, all the windows.
Okay.
We pull up, it's the second floor, we go up and we get up into the apartment, door is open, we get there, the guy's sitting naked in the middle of his apartment on a chair like this, a kitchen chair, and he's just sitting there and all the windows in the apartment are broken and he's wearing a tinfoil helmet. And he's got the whole foil helmet on. And so we talk to him and, what's going on? And, he says, he goes, I had to let the rays out. So the rays, they're coming at me. And if I wear this, then they reflect. He says, but if the windows aren't open, he said they reflect and they keep coming back at me. So when he broke all the windows, he let the rays out. So we take him in, we lock him up and take him to the hospital because he was really seriously screwed up. And we get in there and then we have to wait for the psych unit to come. And we wait and we get there and we're hanging in there for like an hour. And then the psych guy comes out, the top guy comes out and he goes, well, he's okay. We're going to let him go. We think he's okay,
Wow.
We're going like, well, wait a minute. I go, yeah, but he's wearing a tinfoil helmet.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, but he's not going to hurt anybody. So we left.
Wow.
This is crazy stuff.
Well, first of all, let me ask you, Dave and Dale, have you come across a tinfoil helmet?
No, not a tinfoil helmet.
No?
Not a tinfoil helmet, but so right down the street, we got a call for a girl called, and she said, my boyfriend had just smoked marijuana and it was laced with something. He was a huge guy, 6'4", 250, just psychotic. He had jumped out the window. He was naked, jumped out the window, smashed the window, was running down the street.
Oh.
You get 911 calls.
Yes.
911 calls for it. And before the officers get there, a concerned citizen showed up who had a license to carry, because at the point when the concerned citizen showed up, this guy was trying to drag an elderly lady out of her car at a stop sign.
Okay.
So he pulled his gun. Probably not a good idea. He pulled his gun because we get it.
I don't know. Maybe
it wasn't a good idea because when the cops showed up, they're not necessarily focused on the big naked guy.
Right.
Now they're focused on the concerned, helpful citizen with a gun.
Yep.
And they drew down on that guy, and it took about 3 to 5 minutes to figure out who was in the right and who was in the wrong. It was a psychotic guy running through yards naked, yelling and screaming.
But it's Massachusetts, so they went for the guy with a gun.
Absolutely, they did. Yeah, I mean that was the first inclination for what they did.
Why do you think this story, the tinfoil hat, the rays coming back to him, blah blah blah? It seems to be pretty consistent among. It seems to be a certain type of psychosis that you've heard before.
Yeah, schizophrenia.
Yeah, it's a type of schizophrenia.
But it's always that. It's always that story. That's always the narrative.
Yeah, we had a guy. I was a lieutenant at this point, so I go down and check the prisoners. And so I'm down checking the prisoners, and there's a prisoner, and he's literally like glued to the wall, the back wall of the cell, and he's crying. And then he's crying, and I go, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And he says. He goes, please. He goes, I'm not a bad guy. He goes, please turn off the machine.
Oh.
I'm going, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm stuck to the wall. Please turn off the machine. So I was like, oh, okay. I go, okay, I'm going to go turn off the machine now. I literally walk around to the next cell.
Yeah.
I bang on the cell. I go back and I say, okay, I shut the machine off. And he went just like this. He literally collapsed. And he went, thank you. He goes, I was hoping somebody would come by. He goes, I don't know how long I could have stood there.
That's sad.
Oh, it
That's
was
sad.
so sad.
Dave, on this comment, I'm going to preface it with this, that the mental health advocates might not appreciate this comment, but I'm going to say it anyway.
I'm sure if you're saying it, the mental health advocates won't appreciate it.
Well, that sometimes it is funny.
Absolutely it is. That the untapped comedy network lies in the mental health community. Because some of the saddest calls you go on involve mental health calls. However, some of the most outrageously funny situations that no sane comedic mind could ever make up in their own head lie in that community. So Dave, as a promoter of comedians, I highly recommend you visit as many mental health programs as possible. See if you can find the next, I don't know, Bill Burr sitting in there.
You know how many mentally ill comedians there are in Boston? It's like years working in an ambulance, and then I start doing comedy, and I'm like, oh, these are the same type of people that I'm picking up during the day on the ambulance. Like they just get all of a sudden they go to you put a microphone in their hand, and people are just listening to them now.
Yeah.
Where if you take the microphone away, they're just another crazy person on the street.
Yeah, but they'll still be talking. And the sets will be the same.
It's the exact same. Like, oh, this is just mental illness.
Let me ask you this: have you ever seen? How about working comedians? Do you know any working comedians that you suspect are mentally ill? I mean,
I guess like only a handful that probably aren't.
But besides you and me.
Well, what you're saying we're not mentally ill?
We're not mentally ill.
No, I mean we're on the spectrum of mental illness. That's for sure. No,
so you mean mentally ill like schizophrenia? You think comedians have got like schizophrenia and things like that? I mean, I get OCD. I know OCD, you know OCD.
Bipolar. Let me throw that in there.
Bipolar for working comedians?
Absolutely. Manic. Manic stages. Absolutely. That's probably when they write their best comedy, when their mania is very high.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to name names after the show.
It's like an endless list.
All right. So you haven't had a tinfoil hat. We're going to get to you for naked people in just a second, but we got to get his third. Your number three top naked person story.
Let me see. I got another funny thing about cop humor. It's nothing to do with naked people, but does have something to do with cop humor.
All right.
We go to a call. It's a suicide, and we go in, and it's a fairly young guy, and he hung himself in the bathroom, and so we go in, and I was a post supervisor at the time, and we're checking, like what's going on, and so a couple of the detectives showed up, the older guys, and so one of them is a pretty good comedian in his own right, but in this place, it was just his apartment, and he lived there with his sister, and the apartment was totally trash. It was like filled with trash everywhere, and the sink was filled with dirty dishes and dirty pots and pans, like 3 feet high. It was just disgusting. So one of the old detectives goes in, and then he comes out into the kitchen. Of course, so the old detective comes out, and he goes, I think I know why he killed himself. So we're like, wow, Dave, how'd you figure this out already? It was in there like 5 minutes. He goes, it was his turn to do the dishes.
Damn. Murderous.
Just killed.
Which is valid. There's shit, like I have been like, maybe if I just kill myself, I won't have to clean my apartment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're like, this is fair. Yeah.
You could also fake your own death, and that way you leave the apartment.
True.
That's a different topic for a different day.
Yeah.
You got any naked stories for us, Dave?
I mean, it's so funny the difference between cop and like fire EMS, and like all my naked people stories they're not like a lady that wanted to hook up with us. It's always naked people in the street, or it's like naked old ladies in the shower, and like that's one thing.
Dave's very interested in that.
Okay.
At least 80, right?
Yeah.
80 to 90. That's about Dave's.
relate
My
to
dating demographic.
Yeah. Or it's just like there's been just a naked guy in the street. They're always wet for some reason. They're always wet, and then you're just trying to wrestle with them.
Why are they calling? Are they calling?
It would be like, we'll call it like
you're on your way to
because it'll be like, no, like I'm a paramedic too, so I worked on the ambulance for a while, and it'll just be like, like the cops will call you because it'll be like this guy's probably on drugs, so it's a medical, and he's just wrestling a naked guy who's on drugs and he's wet.
You know what my second thought would be? My second thought, if I was wrestling a naked guy as a paramedic, I would think, I hope my partner isn't videotaping with his phone, because it'll be on TikTok.
The hardest thing you could ever do, what he just said, wrestle a naked guy, whether it's the middle of July and he's sweating.
Yeah.
We had that before. gangbanger out of Boston came into our community, had a domestic. He knew we were coming, so he stripped all his clothes off.
Smart
He was
move.
in his bedroom, but he was a big guy, muscular guy, probably about 160.
All of his clothes?
All of his clothes, everything.
That would be, you know what my first thought would be?
What's that?
Don't grab the baton.
And he was in the room and he challenged us, and there was 4 of us. And it took us literally 20 minutes to get him cuffed because you had nothing to grip on.
Smart.
There was one thing you could grip on, Dave.
Yes.
But we didn't go that route.
yeah.
You could not grip on anything.
You could treat him like a puppet too, if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I saw a video. There was a video online of like I think it was in New York. It was like someone was filming. There was like 2 kids on a street like about to get into a fight, and one of them was like definitely would have lost. Like he was just way smaller. He did the smartest thing ever. He just stripped down completely naked, and then the other guy that wanted to beat him up was like, I don't know what to do, and they just didn't fight because he's just like, I'm not going to touch this guy.
There you go.
It's a great move.
Yeah.
Great move.
Well,
Great move.
there's a Dave Russo story like that. What was it? Paul Nardizzi told me a Dave Russo story. Dave's a former collegiate wrestler and a comedian.
Shouldn't we call him to get his approval or not?
No.
He'll love you talking about him. Don't worry.
We can, well, I don't remember the whole story, but it was something like Dave Russo was going to get into a fight with somebody, breaks down into his wrestling stance, and I think did he take those off as well?
I don't think so, but I think he just took him down very quickly and put him in a small package.
Okay.
Wrapped him up a little bit.
So the
You don't
guy
wanna fuck with
expected a
wrestlers.
street fight, and all of a sudden he gets an NCAA wrestling match, and he was stunned and down he went.
But if the guy took his clothes off, Dave might have hesitated, and that would have given the guy an extra second. You know,
I think that'll be that's a little tip for all of our listeners. If you want to win a street fight, take them off.
next time I'm bombing, that's what I'm going to do on stage, just to throw the audience off. You know what I mean?
I don't know. That might horrify.
All right, true.
Tough call. How about this? Since we're on the topic, how many times have you driven up to a car with 2 people in it in the middle of a romantic interlude and known the people?
I've never known the people.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's never happened.
Well, I knew my wife. My wife was one day. One day she was out. Couldn't get in touch with her. Got a call. I'm just kidding.
I was like, dang, this has got dark. This has got dark.
Yeah, it did. He's busted. We talked about this before. He hasn't busted her, but he came across somebody who was another officer's wife.
Yes, another officer's wife. We had one of the heads of the criminal justice department at Endicott College was with some younger boy of legal age and tender, Dave. But
Right.
just he was 40 and the kid was about 26.
Yeah.
Listen. Oh, so it's legal age.
What's legal? It's
No, why?
Well, you got to throw in the younger boy thing, Dave. People's
not a-
ears go up. They start.
Hold
Oh,
on,
young.
Hold on, younger
Dave's
boy.
ears went up. I saw her visibly.
Dave, how old are you?
28.
28. So how do you feel about a 26-year-old being called a younger boy?
I like it. I'm down to be a younger boy for a while. I don't want to grow up. Whatever it takes.
All right. What about this one? I'm sure that you guys all have something on this. We're recording this before July 4th. We're releasing it after July 4th. Any good Independence Day stories for this holiday in which we celebrate our independence by scaring dogs?
I used to work on the ambulance. So I worked for a private ambulance company. So I worked in like all these communities basically on the North Shore. When I worked in Lynn, it literally on the 4th of July turns into Fallujah. It's absolute insanity. And I liked working the 4th because it was like I mean, you'd be up all night doing calls. But I just remember like driving downtown and like turning down a side street. We were just driving around. And all of a sudden, there's literally like 200 people surrounding the ambulance, just shooting fireworks at the
Looking for
ambulance.
drugs.
I was like, yeah, it literally felt like in Black Hawk Down. They were like in the Hummer, the Humvees just driving through and they're getting shot. It was literally like that. They were just like, we're getting blasted by fireworks and Roman candles. Just try to make it out of there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got out.
Yeah, oh yeah. But that was always, I loved it. It was funny.
Yeah. How many fingers do you think were lost that weekend on your shift?
Probably don't even call. They're just like,
That's Lynn. Ain't none of them getting up to go to work in the morning,
Yeah.
Dave. Lynn.
Oh, that's a fine, hard-working city filled with hard-working people. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, we had a few fingers. I've seen a few fingers blown off.
What's the craziest call? July 4th call. Or a fireworks call. Well, actually, it could be something else because it could be just drunken lunacy.
July 4th does bring out weirdness in people. They want to get all these fireworks, and some of them they don't know what they're doing, and they're M80s or they're doing cherry bombs. And yeah, I saw a few hands, a few fingers destroyed.
I think the first shooting I did was 4th of July, like that weekend or that week. That was...
To save the guy or the girl?
Oh, he was alive when we got him to the hospital, but
There you
probably
go.
not. Probably
Stick to that
not.
story.
Yeah, I know.
That's every cop story where you go to a call
Yeah.
And they try to determine, did he die overnight? Because if he died overnight, that means the cops have to stay on scene.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you just may say, oh, he was breathing right before I got here. And they get to the hospital, he has rigor mortis set in and all sorts of stuff going on.
The car thing reminded me, this wasn't catching anyone hooking up in a car, but there was one day we were doing calls all day. We did like 3 overdoses in a row. And we're coming back from the hospital, coming back from dropping someone off for an overdose. Me and my partner are driving, and there's like a 7-Eleven in Wyoming Square in Lynn, and there's a car pulled over there, and we just hear a horn going off, just a car horn. So I look over, and there's someone slumped onto the steering wheel, the car horn going off. We're like, Jesus Christ, another overdose. We go up to the car. I have the bag. I probably already have the Narcan out, and there's a guy, he's literally like he's like tying his shoe in his car. And I'm like, hey, and he's like pops up, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh no, I'm just like tying my shoe. Your head is on the horn. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, what? Why? Well, it was like going off for like a minute straight. It's like, what are you doing?
I'm going to give some parenting advice to Dave over here.
All right.
So if I was your father and I knew a little thing about law enforcement, what I would have said to you, curiosity killed a cat.
Yeah.
Park your cruiser, park your ambulance in the parking lot. If they need you, they'll call you. Because the more you observe and the more you search for stuff, especially in Lynn, you're going to find it.
Yeah, for real.
All right. That's my parenting advice. That's what I tell my kids. Don't get out of bed, sleep all day. If we need you to do anything around the house, if your work calls and they want you to show up, we'll wake you. If not, just stay in bed. You'll be fine.
Did you ever have any calls? Any really noteworthy calls around July 4th?
Well, this was July 4th weekend. I spoke about a podcast we had. There was a large yacht off the beach.
Yeah.
And it was rumored that Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck were in it. This was their first time together back in 2000.
Hold on, because when you're done with this story, I'm going to ask Mike about being no, never mind. Tell the story, then I'll ask Mike.
I know what you're going to say.
I know the story.
Who was supervising these two nitwits on dispatch?
Yeah, exactly.
So we came up with a little plan. People believe that it's Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez on that yacht. So why don't we come up with this? You call me on the radio and say, hey, could you head down to such and such a beach? Mr. Affleck is going to be coming ashore. He wants to report a domestic on the boat with Mrs. Lopez or Ms. Lopez.
Yep.
So we did that. We put it over the radio. It took about 5 or 6 minutes. When I got there, did another thing on the radio. People started calling the police station.
Oh my God.
A local news reporter showed up down there.
Wow.
And then when I got there, I said, oh, disregard. Mr. Affleck called the station and said he doesn't want to report anything. All the while, we had no idea who was on the boat. It could have been them. I have no idea who was on the boat. But people bought right into that, Dave.
That's, and just out of curiosity, you were an adult when this happened?
This was
juvenile.
in the early 2000. Early 2000. I'd probably been on the department for like 7 or 8 years.
Really? You didn't care about losing your job?
No, not really. Oh, back then? No. Back then, no.
Yeah, once you got some time under your belt and the pension started building up, you're like, all right, I should behave now.
Right. So, Mike, when you were captain,
Yeah,
for the last 6, 7 years.
6 years.
Yeah. So were you were a supervisor?
Yeah, I've been a sergeant, I've been a lieutenant, and then I made captain, and I got put in charge of the detectives.
And so this little prank that Dale just described, how would you deal with that in Malden?
I think we would have called him in and said, don't ever do it again, but we would have been laughing. It would have been funny. It would have been fun.
They give you a little wink, Dave. They know it's funny, but then again, they know that in law enforcement, shit rolls uphill.
Yep.
The chief or the captain or the patrol commander is going to get a call from the mayor or the selectman, and they're going to probably have to do what they have to do, and then they're going to call the patrolman in or the sergeant or whoever screwed up, and they're going to have to put the screws to them. And it could be their buddy. They don't want to do it, but they just kind of have to do it with a little wink. That's all, Dave.
A little wink. Yeah. A little wink. We're gonna move to the fireman cops thing, but I did want to talk about this. Are there any cases that you worked on that you're particularly proud of, or that you consider like a highlight in the career, or anything like that?
Yeah, we had a elderly couple that were viciously.
When was that? What year?
06, I think, or 07.
I'll ask the question.
Sorry. All right, Dave, you're right. My bad.
They lived in a very quiet cul-de-sac in Malden. Never, I didn't even know where it was actually, and I'd been on the job probably 30 years at the time. I had to actually look it up when I got the call there, and they were tied up in the basement, beaten almost to death, both of them. It was one of the most horrific, and I'd seen a lot of murders.
Yeah.
probably investigated about 17, 18 murders, but this was not, neither one of them died from this, but it was way beyond anything I'd ever seen. The vicious, the torture, they were both tortured. But for some reason, one of the detectives that came with me that day, back in the day, you could dial *69 and you could see what the last phone number was that the person called. And then we went through, so we got that number. We went through the checkbook. We said, like, why are these people? There had to be something that motivated someone to be in this house, like to come here. And it turned out it was a handyman. And there were two guys. They worked together. One of them was a handyman. Had been a handyman for many years and had been doing work in the house. And the other guy had just got out of prison. They had hooked up and they were doing little odd jobs together. But it turned out it was those two guys. And
what was it? Why did they torture him? They were trying to find,
because the guy that had just got out of prison, that was his thing. It had nothing to do with money. They did steal some stuff from them. It had nothing to do with money. It was not related to money. I mean, they stole some stuff, but the guy that had just got out of prison was a very dominant personality, and he dominated the other guy completely.
Wow.
But his thing was torturing people. And he had already done, I think he had done like 20 years already in prison, and then he got released. It was horrendous, to say the least.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Dave?
It's a good win. Is it all right if Dave asks a question?
Yeah.
Is that,
did you share?
Yeah.
It's your. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, I appreciate you.
No, how did you make the connection that it was the handyman and the other guy?
Because the last call that the woman made was the *69 call. It was to the handyman. And then she had written him a check the day before. So we figured, okay, the check is missing. The check's not there. And she had made the call. So she must have called the guy to say the check is ready for you. That's what we just kind of assumed it. Then me and two other detectives, we went over to Revere where the handyman lived. We knocked on the door. His son came to the door, who was about maybe 17, 18 years old, and immediately started swearing at us when we told him we were cops. We just want to talk to your father, And he started effing us and, what do you want? Get away, we don't want to talk to you. Well, just tell your dad we're here, Father came down, talked to him for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then he said, I'm not talking to you guys anymore. We literally stepped outside and the three of us looked at each other and go, bingo. We just knew this was the guy.
Did you take him in then?
No.
Right.
And it took us about 2 weeks to get a warrant for him. And then we squeezed him until he gave up the other guy. And then we got the warrant for the other guy.
And the couple, you said they lived, right?
They both survived. Yeah.
And they were
just, it was vicious. Cuts, broken teeth. The male party ended up deaf because they kept punching him in the side of the head and
did they
him up with wires and
did they not see him, or did they not? Were they afraid to give him up? Were they?
Neither one of them could talk. One of them was in a coma for I think like 3 weeks.
Ugh.
The male, the female, she was out of it for about a week. And then she came around.
And so there's not a lot of time for you guys to waste.
Yeah, we didn't.
How long did it take to solve it?
We got a warrant for the handyman probably about 6 or 7 days. It took us to get a warrant. We gathered enough stuff. We got his fingerprints in the house. Of course, he's going to say, "Well, of course, I was in the house fixing things."
Yeah.
But we did everything we had to do. We dotted all the I's, crossed the T's because we knew it was going to be an important case. And so we got him. We locked him up in about 6 days. I think it was about 6 days from the event. And then we brought him in. We squeezed him over and over again. Kept bringing him out of the cell. And one guy acts nice, good cop, bad cop.
Can I jump in for a sec, Mike?
Yeah.
I'm going to dumb it down for Dave a little bit.
Yeah, dumb it down for me so I can understand it.
Detective terms or interrogation terms, when they squeeze someone, they pretty much present the case to a certain degree, and they try to put the screws to you and say, "Hey, Dave, you might have been there, but if you didn't do any of the abuse, you might do life. You might get out in 20 years, but we're looking for the guy who did all the bad stuff, who's going to go to prison forever." So they put it on you, and hopefully you're going to rat him out, which he did. The term is squeeze him, Dave, all right?
You think I don't watch TV?
Well, I know you do, but I don't know if it I had to put it in layman's terms.
I'm thinking to myself, why did it take him 7 days? When I see it on TV, it's all gets solved in 40 hours.
Was that 48 hours? Yeah, 48 hours.
Half an hour.
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
The first half hour hour they solve the crime, and the second half hour they prosecute him.
Dave's a lot smarter than he appears to be. Sometimes there's a little bit of a comprehension issue.
Here's how I'm going to show how smart I am. I'm going to stop talking to him, and I'm going to turn my attention to Dave. Everybody loves firemen. We've talked about this before. People only love police when they want something.
They never love us, Dave.
You know something? If I've got a problem and I need a cop, I love cops. And when one of them's pulling me over for whatever I've done, I don't like them, and I just hope they don't ask me to open the trunk. Dale has a theory that all firemen think they can do a policeman's job better than the cop does. The cop does his job. I have a theory that I just made this up out of thin air, that firemen and cops are like dogs and cats. And I don't know why. I have no really idea. Which is
there's nothing more to that bit. That's you have the premise.
So which is more correct, Dave? That firemen think they can do the cop's job better than cops can, or that firemen and cops are like dogs and cats with no real explanation?
Okay, I'm gonna go with that's the most incorrect because there's nothing else to it. Probably a lot of firefighters do think they can do a cop's job better than them, but it's just
that's everybody.
Yeah, everyone thinks they can do. Everyone thinks they can do the other.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone we deal with says, why aren't you doing this? How come you're not doing this? How come you're not doing that? Oh yeah.
Or how come there's so many of you here?
Yeah,
I hate that's. I get annoyed when yeah.
It's the only profession, Dave. The only profession that people will stop you on the street. They'll call you on the phone. They'll make a complaint. They'll put it on Facebook. They'll tell the cop how to do their job. You ever drove down the street and see a guy painting the house? He's going left to right, left to right. You slam on the brakes. You say, "Hey, Hector, you don't paint left to right in this country. It's right to left, right to left." Everyone knows how to do a cop's job.
I don't assume every house painter is named Hector. All right?
I don't know what city you live in.
Teachers go through the same thing. Yeah. Teachers go through the same thing. I used to be a newspaper reporter. I used to hear the same thing all the time. You ought to talk to him. You ought to talk to him. You ought to write this. This is how you should write it. I mean, I think you're right. Cops, I think people do. Nobody says it to firemen. They don't come over and say, "Shoot in that window." Shoot the water in that window.
No, they do. They do. Definitely as a paramedic, everyone thinks they know everything. Especially in Lexington, it's a lot of it's a nice community. There's a lot of doctors and stuff.
Yeah.
So you'll show up and you'll be treating someone, and their daughter will be, be like an old lady. Their daughter's a doctor, and they'll come up and be like, "I'm a doctor. This is what you should do." Blah blah blah. And then you're like, "Oh, what type of doctor are you?" And like, "Oh, I'm a podiatrist." You're like, "Oh, cool. Then get out of the way. You have no idea what you're talking about."
I'm gonna vouch for Dave over here. He's a paramedic.
Yes.
The absolute best person you want on the street is a seasoned paramedic. You don't want a doctor who's a foot doctor or a dentist on scene.
You're saying that I don't want a dentist or a PhD for my medical emergency?
Absolutely not.
I'm a doctor.
You want a
American
seasoned
history
veteran paramedic who's done gunshot wounds, stabbings, overdoses. They're a lot more competent on the street. Street level.
Street doctors.
Absolutely.
It's just a different job. Like even a medical, like a emergency room physician, they're in a hospital, so they have like a lot more resources than we do. They don't think like we think in the street. Like I've seen it. I've seen nurses and doctors like pull up at car accidents and stuff and then panic and not know what to do, because it's a different job. I wouldn't be able to operate in an emergency room like they can, do what they do.
I know this. You're an emergency room surgeon. What's the first thing you do? You go to the ATM and you make a deposit, then you come back, then you wash your hands, then you cut. You got money. You got to take care of your money.
Yeah, that's true.
Mike, let me ask you a question. Are firemen a big pain in the ass?
We generally got along pretty good. One of my best friends was a fireman on the, I met him on the job. But we had guys on our job, especially the older crew, like the Korean War vets, the World War II vets. When I first got on, my
dad's old.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself. So there was no Civil War. No Civil War.
There was definitely the word going around, and I don't think I've ever even told my son this. The word going around, the older guys would call the firefighters. They called them the rubber-clad ambassadors of goodwill.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
That's what they would call them.
Yeah. You want to know the worst? This was probably the worst scenario when firemen come on board. Yep. Now, you go to a call, it's 2 a.m, there's a single car accident, no one's injured, okay? Maybe the guy hit a tree or the girl hit a tree. Probably a slight injury, maybe not injured at all. Cops show up, we might know the person, he or she might have had a few beers, and the cop may do the person a favor and not arrest them. tow their car,
You ever do that, Mike?
take them home. But what happens when the firemen show up and 3 or 4 highly motivated Sparkies show up and they want to point out that she's drunk or he's drunk. And then they start pissing and moaning. Why don't you arrest him? My friend was arrested. Then when they intervene and stuff like that, sometimes you have to arrest someone now because you're creating a big scene.
It's interesting.
We had a city councilor once, way back in the day, probably 1980 or 81. We had a city councilor drive down back the street that's behind the police station, Exchange Street, and you guys might remember there was a Jordan Marsh in Malden. I don't know if you guys were that old, old enough. But
Dave bought all his suits.
yeah, there was a Jordan Marsh store in Malden, and they were tearing the building down eventually. So they had this gigantic dumpster on Exchange Street with phones and flashing lights and everything. So it took up half the street, but you could still get by. So the city councilor comes down. He's doing about 35 or 40 down Exchange. Wham! Right into this 48 or 50-foot dumpster. Destroys his car. We get there, and he is hamming. We're like, he didn't hurt anybody other than his own car. He was like, I'm sorry, guys. We took him home.
That was Sergeant Mike. A week later, he was Lieutenant Mike.
Cops
That's
don't
how
do
it works, Dave.
Cops don't do that anymore. They don't take people home anymore.
Let me shift this a little bit, but we'll stay with you, Dave.
Right.
The reputation of the policing profession taking a beating in recent years, as you know. Have you heard this criticism and thought to yourself, it serves my dad right for grounding me during senior week?
You're just still trying to pit us against. I will say this. I had a healthy fear of my dad growing up, but that's changed now. Now, come on, it would be a one-sided fight. But I.
Which side?
I mean, come on. No, I'm just kidding. I think that. What was the question?
The question is, do you think that the beating never mind. Is it justified? What was it like growing up as a cop of the kid of a cop? Bit of a cop.
Well, I don't know. I see people. Well, one thing like very early on is I remember being at summer camp, literally at Camp Rotary in Boxford, and there was like one kid that I don't know how old. I was in probably 7th grade, and there was just some kid like spouting off about how much he hated cops. I mean, just a white kid from probably Topsfield, Massachusetts. Yep. You know what I mean? Just like, cops suck, blah 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 blah. And I didn't tell him my dad was a cop, but like you see a lot of that, especially you go to high school. People, like, I hate cops. All cops suck. It's like, I don't know, man. Do they all suck? Or are you kind of an asshole? Yeah. And that's really the problem. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, I don't know. I'm very down the middle. Like, I'm probably biased in favor of cops, but I think I'm pretty down the middle. There's a lot of asshole cops that you talk to cops. I talk to you and you're like, yeah, this guy is bad for policing because he's giving the rest of us a bad reputation. You know what I mean? And like, there probably does need to be more, I don't know. Do you think there needs to be more accountability amongst police officers? Because you all know the shitty guys on the department. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're like, this guy's an asshole. This guy treats people like shit for no reason. He's burnt out. Like, I don't know. It's like a tough balance. I see both sides of it.
Too much of a politician for me. I'm not. Let me ask you this. Was Dave a rebellious middle and high school thug, or was he a good kid? Did the job influence the way you raise your kid?
Well, I think it does, yeah, because you see what's going on in the world, and you don't want your kids to end up. I had a son and a daughter, and David's got a younger sister, and I think the thing I feared most was the drug situation.
Yeah,
because you can do anything. You can try as hard as you can, and sometimes kids go off the rails.
Yeah,
you can do everything right, and the thing I didn't want was for my kids to get involved with drugs.
How did you deal with it? Were you stricter than you?
I was probably a little stricter than I would have been if I hadn't been a cop, maybe, but I also gave my kids, especially as they got into high school, I gave them a lot of freedom. They had their car, they had cars, and they were going out, they were doing their things with their friends. But I think you have to trust them, and you have to raise them right. And you can't start at 16 because if you do, you've already lost them. So,
right.
You start raising them right when they're a kid, and and then what happens.
I will say it's like I talk about it on stage, but I embellish it a little. But like he definitely, I realized was like certain aspect of parenting was way different with him. The situational awareness thing, like I remember like being a young. I can't remember how. I have memories of you telling Monica when she was like a little child, being like, if someone ever attacks you, like go for their eyes. You know what I mean? Poke them in the eyes. They have to react. Or like being in a restaurant and you pick a chair that was like facing the door.
Oh, that's
of a, you know what I mean? Like little stuff that I look back on. I'm like, that's not a normal parenting. You don't a normal parent like wouldn't think of that.
Wait, well, you noticed about the restaurant, the seat of the restaurant. And you also were a little clued into it by him saying to the 3-year-old, to your 3-year-old sister, if you're attacked,
go for the eyes, or like telling me to like keep my head on a swivel.
Can I ask this question? You don't have to answer it. So when you went in the Malden restaurants, your father was with you. Did he wear his uniform so he got all free meals? Even if it was a Sunday, he wasn't working.
I will say that's more of a firefighter thing.
Oh, okay.
The firefighters like love wearing their shirts to bars and stuff. It's a bad look. I don't wear any of my fire stuff like out really. Although, cops do it too, but it's like, I don't know. It's just stupid.
Good way to get a free meal.
Yeah, I know. I just do my thing.
Either that or they spit in the food.
Yeah, one or the other.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
See, that's good. That's good thinking. What about you? You had Dale, your kids growing.
Yeah. I was concerned that if I was a overzealous cop on the street and people perceive me, or especially younger kids perceive me as like a prick, they'd take it out on my kid, the son of my daughter.
Yeah.
So I was very conscious when they started middle school to high school, make sure that whenever I was dealing with kids in that age group, that I was very aware of how I dealt with them, because I didn't want my kid to go in school on a Monday morning. And I'm going to end this with a little quick story. You go in school on a Monday morning and the kid says, "Hey, isn't your father the cop? He broke up our party. He arrested 3 kids. He called us all a bunch of punks." And then they knuckle my son in the bathroom. Yeah. I remember a call when I was a school resource officer. It was a Friday afternoon. We got a report at the high school for a fight and the middle school for a fight. I didn't know which one to go to. I went to the high school because I figure high school kids can do more damage. The high school kid fighting, his father was a cop. And the middle school kid, same father, his other son. And they got into fights because kids knew their father was a cop. And for whatever reason, they didn't like him. I love him because he listens to the podcast all the time. For whatever reason, that Friday afternoon, a couple of kids had a beef with his father, and they took it out on his kids. Yeah. I believe both of his kids kicked the kid's ass, so that's good.
Oh, that is good.
You got to teach a kid how to fight.
That is good. Yeah. Well, the other thing is, you if you live in the same community you work, you don't live in Malden, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I was lucky. Like, I had a lot of friends I'm from PBD. I had a lot of friends that their dads were PBD cops.
Yeah.
And it had a lot. I'm like very thankful he didn't work in PBD. It like works to their benefit. Like, I think, they probably got away with some stuff. I think it also turned some of them into pricks because they're like, "Oh, my dad's a cop. What are you going to do to me?" That's definitely a problem with cops' kids.
Yeah.
Like, they're sometimes the biggest assholes in school.
I was going to
say, cops' kids.
I told my kid, don't you ever say your father's a cop. If they know I'm a cop because they come over and they're fine, and my daughter, my son, but don't you sit there and say, "Oh, my dad's a cop. Right. Don't do this."
Do you know who I am?
Yeah, if you're going to get in a jam with a kid, get in a jam with them. We'll send over the cops. They'll arrest the other kid. You're all set.
Well, it's sort of like, I think cop kids are like preachers' kids. They go in one direction or the other. Yeah. Preachers' kids are always preachers' daughters.
They're tramps. They're tramps, Dave. They're tramps.
Not always, but they tend to be, they're hypersexualized or very conservative. Yeah. And preachers' kids, boys tend to be rebellious or not rebellious. It's the same thing, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's true of cops themselves. Like, I think a lot of cops are the kid in high school that's like rebellious and like out of control, and then
a bully,
and then you see him like 10 years later and they're a cop, and it's funny, like there's a karma aspect to it where it's like now people are being dicks to them, the kids are being dicks to them. It's like, that was you 10 years ago. But I think it's because it takes that type of personality in a weird way. It's like two sides of the same coin. Like, you need to be a little crazy to do that job.
Yeah.
So when you're a kid, you don't have that, like, you're not tamed. You don't have that discipline.
Yeah.
But you're just untamed crazy.
All right. I get 2 questions to wrap up.
Yeah.
All right. One's a follow up to what you're saying now. Take a look at Dale. Take a look at your dad.
Yeah.
I know you're going to go back, and for all I know, you probably still live at your parents' house. But look at both of them and tell me, which one do you think was the bigger asshole in high school?
Asshole in high school?
High school?
In high school, when you were in high school, what do you think was? You think about it too, Mike. Look at Dale.
I don't think my dad was. I don't think you're an asshole.
All right, let's say hellion. You want to go hellion?
You definitely had a couple. You'd have maybe had a little rebellious, a couple instances. told me about, a couple. I don't know. Dude,
I was out of my mind.
Were you? Yeah, all right. I don't want to say it, but yeah.
Out of my mind.
Yeah.
Here's the giveaway. Well, let me tell you. Do you know what the giveaway is?
I know the giveaway.
But the
What's the
goatee.
giveaway? No,
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps. Yeah, the Marine
absolutely.
Corps.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this story. When I
No doubt about
Yeah.
it. No doubt about
He
it.
went to the
Yeah.
Marine Corps and his.
No doubt about it.
He told you about his dad. He went to the Marine Corps. Marine Corps is his dad, basically.
Yeah.
You say that's right?
Yes, but when I worked in the high school as a school resource officer,
Yep.
and they introduced me, a day or two later, the chief called me and said, "Hey, come in the office." He asked me if I knew a principal at one of the schools. I said, yes, I knew that principal because when I was a student in the high school, she was like a math teacher,
Okay.
young math teacher. So, 20 years later, I'm the school resource officer. And he said to me, he goes, she complained that she didn't want you to be the school resource officer because she said, I knew him in middle school and in high school. And he was disrespectful. He was into drugs and drinking and all sorts of stuff. And she didn't think I was a good role model for the kids.
Yeah.
That's 20 years later. Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your reputation stays forever.
Yeah.
Imagine if you'd been a comedian.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It seems contradictory that type of kid grows up to be a cop. It makes sense because you almost want that. Like you want the kid that knows how troubled kids are
Yes.
behaving and knows how to talk to them. You know what I mean? And relate to them. You don't want some nerd that grows up to be a cop. I feel like nerds that grow up to be cops and firefighters are always bad
They're
cops.
the
and
biggest pricks usually.
Yeah, they're the biggest pricks. They're bad cops and fire. They don't know how to. They just get angry at kids. And they're not helping them. That's my theory.
All right.
I would have done great in Malden. I would have done great there.
You would have done great. You would have done great everywhere. No question. You know what you would have liked? You would have liked TSA. I think Dale is the kind of person.
Working at the airports?
Yeah, TSA.
Everyone gets a cavity check.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone gets hassled. Everyone gets bothered.
Everyone's a potential terrorist.
All right, this is I don't really have a question, but I figure we gotta wrap up because of time. Anything you guys want to mention that we haven't mentioned?
I mean, I don't know how much time we have. He has a lot of good stories about like big cases and stuff like that. I think
We'll have to have you back for that.
good stuff. Yeah.
We'll have to have you back. Supposedly we got a hard stop at 45. We're at about 55 now.
Don't worry, Dave. I'm going to cut out 10 minutes. Whenever you're talking, it'll be 10 minutes. I'll cut out.
That's fine.
Well,
that's
that's good.
fine.
It was a good experience. I'm glad I met you guys.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'd love to have you back. I'd love to have you back. I don't know, Dale.
We're just trying to put a personal perspective on policing in America and in Massachusetts. That cops are just like anyone else out there doing the job. Firemen are just like anyone else there doing the job. Good days, bad days, just like you, Dave. Sometimes you're great on stage. Other days you're like an open mic, first night comedian.
I'm always great. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
That's Mike and Dave Caggiano. I'm Dave Rattigan. That's Dale Lawrence. Has been Inside the Line. Real stories by real cops. As always, we appreciate you listening, and please share us with your friends.
Don't forget Naughty Doctors. What's your website?
Naughty Doctors Podcast. It's on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. And then follow me on social media. It's at Dave Caggiano.
Caggiano. Is it Dave or is it David?
Dave.
Good. And he's funny. I'll tell you that. Guys, we hope that this last hour has helped you too with your relationship. Be sure to give us your insurance cards on the way out. And don't forget the copay. But Dale, I'm Dave. See you all next week.